I'm one of the leadership team members for the Children, Youth, and Adolescents Work Group, and I'd like the other team members that are here to introduce themselves.
I'm Jason Owens. I'm the, sorry, go ahead.
I'm Dulce Valdez, and sorry for the confusion. I'm one of the team members as well that have the leadership team.
And I'm Jason Owens. I'm the principal at the Handy Around Center for Success, which you don't know where that's at. You're in it right now. So welcome, and I'm also one of the members of the leadership.
We have two members that aren't here today, Chandra Diaz and Nicole Hirsch. So they're also part of this group. You all should have in front of you an agenda packet, and this information will guide us through the day with our agenda and then some handouts as well. So the purpose of today is to do a real brief recap of what we accomplished in our last meeting, and then we will focus on how we're going to move forward. I'll touch base on a vision of how we got here, and then we're going to jump into breakout groups again, and Jason will lead us in those activities to move towards an action plan. So today is actually the second meeting of this particular work group, and let's see if there's a slide. Can we have that?
Michelle, could you bring up the structure of the flower petal?
So what you see on the PowerPoint is actually a graphic that represents the collective impact structure that's been created to attain the 2030 vision for the Buffalo County Communities Partners. And you can see that there are 4 areas of focus: vulnerable populations, behavioral health, access, children and youth, and adolescents. Those four groups, this is the first group to be launched. And as I mentioned, this is just our second meeting. And those areas of focus those groups were formed to focus on 2 key areas of impact: to increase access, information, resources, training, and programs and services. And the second is to prevent persons, in this case, children, youth, and adolescents, from entering or re-entering the system. So in our last meeting, we worked on a resource document where we all shared our organization's purpose, some of their key objectives, and our capacity. And we want that to be a document that we can continue to refer to as we come to learn more about each other and our organization's services. And so as we work together today, if you have updates or changes that you want to make to what you included in that document, let Michelle know, and we'll do that. The document will actually be housed on the Buffalo County Community Partners website, and there will be a link so you can continuously update it so all of us can make sure that we understand the work that you do in your organization as well. But today we will break out into breakout groups, and Jason will lead us through that. But first we need to look at the minutes from the last meeting, give you a minute to review those, and then I'll take a motion from the floor to accept those. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion, all opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. So with that, Jason.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. We thought we'd start out by talking about how you define a system in your community. And it was interesting when we met last and talked about systems in our community, because my brain and my line of work goes straight to Doug and Jen and the work we do together in the justice system with our kids. But there's all sorts of other systems, like the systems at the Handy Aram Center, where we're trying to get kids the necessary skills so they can be successful outside of high school. So when they leave with a diploma, they don't just have a diploma, they have the skills that they can write, they can read, they can do math in order to get a job that they can support themselves and hopefully their family one day. One of my big discussions I have with the kids here a lot is, well, I don't need that. I've got a job right now working at whatever quick high school job they have, whether that's for lawn service or fast food or what have you. And I tell them, well, what are you going to do when someone's not paying for your car or paying for your phone or paying where you live? Where are you going to go to make enough money to help yourself? And so one of the systems we have here is our system of career track and readiness. So that would be a system. So we all have different systems in the lines we do. Like I said, my first thought was the juvenile justice system, because that's who I work with the closest between, the truancy and diversion and probation groups, because a lot of my kids are in those types of groups and working with those supports. But I want to know, what do you guys think of when you hear community and system?
I think of any service that they're needing to get support from. So whether that's support of rent, food, anything that they are not fully sufficient on and they're receiving services for, to me, that's a system.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the system as something they don't have a choice to be in at the time because of their circumstances. So for me, health and human services, juvenile justice, that they kind of are in that situation. It's not like just learning counseling or deciding to access a service.
Any systems they have a choice to go to?
Their friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of their system, their education. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good.
Right.
But who they hang with, that peer pressure part of the system they rely on daily.
Another positive systems that kids can be included in is their sports organizations and extracurricular activities that they do. There's those community-wide activities that are youth focused.
Mm-hmm. I even look at our park system. A lot of my students here, they're not a part of a sports group, even though we try to get them involved in either a club or an activity. But the skate park, a lot of my kids will go down the skate park, and I've gone down there with them and they skate and they have a good time, and that's a system for them. Not everybody's going to be playing soccer or doing things like that, but they may be using those types of systems to help themselves as well.
I think of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I can look into that systems in which individuals can volunteer and become part of the community through volunteering and purpose. And also, again, family system comes to mind immediately.
I also think of sometimes the aggravation for families who are in multiple systems that need to work together, that don't necessarily align or have all of the pieces in place that will make it all work well for that family. So it's still, even though families are in maybe supportive systems, it's still not working for them.
Other thoughts? I know we're eating right now, so it's tough. You know, there's a school system, there's, you know, faith systems. When we were sitting talking about it, you know, my mind was narrowly focused on about 3 things. And then by the end of our meeting, I was like, holy cow, there's so many different systems in Kearney that aren't necessarily punitive or a result of a decision. And I needed to open my mind to think of those things that are there to be preventing things and a system to support things.
So we need to change our term of system, because the defining impact is preventing them from entering or re-entering system.
I think so, because not all systems are for that. You know, I mean, what is a school system for? You know, and what are faith systems for? And so I think when we initially came up with that, we probably weren't looking broad enough, like we ended up realizing from one another. So yeah, I think you're right.
Is that a matter of like narrowing it to, could it be 1 or 2 words, like let's hope that's not the right term, but like the legal or health and human services system? I mean, is there a way to narrow down and just define what system or system you're referring to? Because there's way more positive systems than negative. I think when I think of the system initially, I think of the legal sources and I think of health and human services. Those are the 2 that immediately, without consciously thinking about it, come to mind. Is it that simple changing that, or is there other ways or directions that you could take it on that?
Well, the good thing too is with these note cards, you guys can put kind of your thoughts on those about this as well. And when we're done, we'll collect those and those can be some of the things that we look at our next meeting before our next meeting. So.
And perhaps part of it is also how to guide into positive systems. So that maybe it's not just preventing, but also guiding and supporting. So I think as we go through the discussions in the small groups today, perhaps can we agree to think of it in that way? Perhaps there's 2 pieces to this. One is what are ways we can encourage positive systems, and the other would be how do we have our conversations in our small groups that also looks at how do we prevent from entering or re-entering. And for now, until we can get clear about the language, is everybody comfortable with that we'll look at it from both sides? And then we can work on wordsmithing a change on our own so that we don't slow up our action time together. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, I look at probation and health and human services. Some people look at that as a punitive system or a system because of bad things. And Doug and Jen, when you guys work with my kids here at school, you know, I look at it as a positive system because it's hopefully keeping them from extending their bad decisions to something that's going to lead them down the road to being a system that's not incarnate. And so, and I look at health and human services the same way, and I look at probation the same way. And that's what I, from my lens in this school, enjoy about working with all those groups. So. Want to do the breakouts? All right, we're going to do breakout sessions now. And there's 3 breakouts. And Matt, which one are you over there?
I think this one is 6 to 17. Ken over here is 0 to 5. And then Martha will be in the back with 18 years.
Okay, so basically we're breaking them out by 0 to 5 years, 6 to 17 years, and 18 plus. In your breakouts, we're gonna sit and we're gonna discuss some of the things that we've talked about and some of the things I have for you to talk about. So if you want to head over to one of those groups, that would be awesome.
We want to talk to like the rules, like reporters and delegating first.
Okay.
Reporter, she knows how that rolls, and then each of those groups what role.
Oh,
Reporter. So when you get into your groups, if you'll identify a recorder, you'll have a Buffalo County, one of the staff will support so that we can use technology to capture your thoughts. So just be prepared that somebody needs to share and somebody needs to record as we get into our groups.
so basically, our first breakout, we're going to talk about the accomplishments and past setbacks the community has seen that prevented children and youth, whichever group you're in, from entering or re-entering the system.
And so given what we just talked about with the different systems, just if you can just, I think right now we're trying to think about the systems that maybe are not the most productive in terms of, we don't think of as the most positive, but we just had this conversation about positive versus, so just keep that in mind as you have your conversation. We're just gonna grow as we go.
So we're gonna have 10 minutes to do that. Then you guys will have 2 minutes in your group to prioritize, and we'll do a quick 5-minute. Each group will kind of report their findings out. Okay.
And this is the graphic that you're gonna follow along. This is, so you might want to refer to this piece. This will help you visually if you're to navigate. We're gonna start with the past.
Right.
And you're in accomplishment and setback columns.
If you want to take your chair over to your group, you can. If you come over to this group over here, there's some chairs over here. You don't have to drag it all the way across the room.
Okay. And you've got 10 minutes for this first discussion.
I don't know. So I'll put in information here to work through this. So it'll just be kind of conversation. I'm going to report. So let me know, when we start going. Let's type in here. I'll do my best.
Hi, Zoom participants. Michelle Toucan from Buffalo County Community Partners. Sorry, I was trying to get Matt to shut off our volume so my voice isn't booming into the room over there. Hopefully we're not being an annoyance. Looks like we're good. Okay, awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Josh, for getting us going here too. So I dropped in the Google document that we have set up that the breakout rooms are using. So if you guys have access to that, can grab that. I can also share our screen as well. Since we have kind of a smaller group, maybe with some new faces, maybe we can just take a small second and do really quick introductions, who you are, maybe what agency you work with, and then maybe what age group you work with. If you do work with children, youth, or adolescents, that might help us kind of streamline our conversation. So I'm just gonna ask Jody, I see you, Josh, to introduce yourself, and then Kyle.
Sure, my name's Jody Trejo. I work at Midwest Encouragement and Counseling Center. And we work with youth from all ages here. Personally, I'd say probably birth to 12 would be where I typically see the most on my own caseload. But we really do serve up from adolescents to adults now as well with some of our other clinicians within the practice.
And I'm Josh Pierce. I'm the new school counselor at Kearney Catholic here in Kearney. So I work with 6th through 12th grade students.
Excellent.
Sorry, Kyle, I saw you kind of maybe unmute, but Kyle, if you want to introduce yourself, and then Janelle and Angie.
I guess I'll just go ahead and go. I am Angie Johnson, owner and operator of Adventure to Success, which is child development center in Kearney. Janelle
Brock with the VA suicide prevention program. And my age group would be basically the 18 and above.
Thank you, ladies. Kyle said he's going to type in the chat, having a little bit of audio issues. Kyle Walton is with 211. And then Natalie Hanna introduced herself in the chat. She is a childhood educator. So she works with that early childhood birth to 5 range. And then Chris Schroeder, if you want to introduce yourself, if you're available. Chris Schroeder dropped it into the chat as well. So perfect, thank you. It seems like we kind of have a little bit of a range here, some of the early childhood people, and Josh working with more of the middle school, high school age. Oh, Jessica, I see you're back. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Jessica Vickers with Live Well Counseling. We work with all ages.
Thanks, Jessica. So I don't know, team, if you guys have a kind of a section that you want to work in. I'm going to share this Google Doc so we can just kind of follow along some of the questions that the breakout team is looking at. So if you're able to access this document, this first page is just the questions that they're working on. So we have 10 minutes to kind of go through these 3 sections, and then we're going to do a report out. So that's what we'll hear when the full team comes back. So our first question we're looking at is, what accomplishments and past setbacks has the community seen that's prevented children and youth from entering or re-entering the system? So then if you scroll down to these pages, these are each of the breakout groups. So I don't know if we want to kind of focus on one age group, or if each of you want to go in and maybe make some edits here. So I'm asking for the group, do we want to focus on one age group here to have a conversation? I know we're like a little bit spread out.
Do we want to look at a little bit older, since we have all age groups and then older?
That seems like it would work. Thanks, Jody. So we do have split. We'll just scroll here. The first is that 0 to 5 age range. The next age range that they're working at is that 6 to 17. So kind of that adolescent. And then the other breakout group is that 18 plus. So I think maybe we can focus here in the 6 to 17 age range. So that first question again, sorry, I'm gonna have to scroll back up here. What accomplishments and past setbacks has the community seen that's prevented children and youth from entering or re-entering the system?
Well, long time ago, we had a lot of these community-based services that went away because we wanted services offered more in the home, or I guess I shouldn't say community-based services, like residential treatment, different facilities were available. And then legislation changed and everything was put back into the communities, which was, I suppose, was supposed to be an accomplishment. But what's happened is we have kids with high needs and we have nowhere to get them where they need to go because there's no mid-level services from outpatient counseling really to inpatient, which inpatient here is only really specified in the moment crisis. And it is really hard to get, because there aren't very many residential programs now, it is really hard to get a kid into a residential treatment facility. Or we used to have more therapeutic foster homes as well. Those have decreased too over the years. And so we've got a lot of burnt out caregivers and families that are trying to meet the needs of their kids. And we don't have the services to support that in the community, I guess. I don't know what everybody else feels. If everybody can remember back in the day when we had all those, we had the ranch and we had boys and girls and we had a lot of different options that we don't have now.
Thanks, Jessica. So that would definitely sounds like a setback in our community, right? I heard you say kids with high needs. We have a lot of kids with high needs and nowhere really to put them.
The idea was great. I'll give people that. The idea was great that families could be served locally, right? Wrap community services around them. But I think one, you have a lack of engagement from certain families. And then the other piece is, I don't know that the services were set up in the community or funded appropriately in the community to stay. That what was there has gone away and now we just don't have anything. So we pretty much jumped from not crisis to crisis services. Like there's not a lot of in between. Sorry, that was kind of a loaded answer.
Thanks, Jessica, for kind of getting the ball rolling here. So again, I think if we're looking at, sorry, I've got too many screens open. Looking at our screen here, that would probably be a setback. I'm assuming not a lot of in-between services for youth in this age group. If we have any accomplishments, feel free to maybe type those in the chat and I can type those in. Matt said we've only got probably 1 minute. It looks like people are kind of coming back together. They're going to report out and then we can continue our discussion. So thinking about the strengths and weaknesses, again, in our community.
Right. And I think when I come in and I was able to get through it, it's been a back.
Would like to report out.
So they're not.
All right, everybody, I think that is time if you finish your thoughts and then we're ready to report out.
Can I stay where we are to report out, Matt?
If you want, yeah. Might make it easier. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready to report out. If you'll, we'll start with 0 to 5 and we'll just go based on the age group, if that's all right with you all. Okay, so I think Eric's going to share our top 3 in each area. I can't see the screen.
So our accomplishments, we said early childhood initiatives, parent education and support, community support systems like the Kearney Children's Museum, Kearney Parks and Rec, library, YMCA. Setbacks would be COVID. We're still feeling the effects of that. School and child care expulsions, hard to focus on social emotional due to hierarchy needs not being met.
I'm still waiting for someone to read that.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, so we have the 6 to 17 age group, and as far as past accomplishments, we really talked about some specific things that have impacted kids in that age group. So the opening of the Handy Around Center has been huge, helping kids, you know, that are involved with truancy and diversion, keep them out of that higher end juvenile justice system by improving that behavior. And then Mr. Owens filled us in on the Hope Squad, which several of us learned about through this, but students at Kearney High can have a little like green handkerchief tied to it. I think they have to have some training and information, but then they're seen as an ally for kids experiencing mental health issues, as someone that they can go to access resources and get some help. So that's a really cool thing happening right here in our community. And then our the struggles that we've seen, the setbacks, that's what they're called. The setbacks are all kind of intertwined and not mutually exclusive from each other. They a lot revolve around COVID and the mental health issues that kids have experienced because of that, and then the lack of resources that they have around mental health issues that then, because of their mental health issues, they're getting system involvement. So it's kind of a cycle right now, but COVID's been a big piece of that, is what we discussed. And just the family involvement and parental involvement in there too. That parents don't have what they need, or parents are struggling. And so then in turn the kids are struggling. And just the political climate and social media and internet and all of those things are kind of exacerbating what's happening.
We have the 18 plus group. Our accomplishments that were discussed over here were academic type scholarships. They talked about the Thompson Scholarship and Carnegie scholarship programs that have been put into place for educational needs. The transition program for the 18 to 21 youth to be able to stay in school longer and to work on their needs that they need to fulfill education-wise, career-wise, just those independent living skills. We talked about a program with Kearney Police Department. It's an 18, 19, and 21-year-old first-time offenders for minor possession. So there's a program where they come in and they go through the court system, well, not the court system, but through that program, so the diversion program. We talked about the HHS Bridge to Independent program, Project Everlast, and Connected Youth Initiatives. We talked about drug court being an accomplishment, Veterans Court as well, and then Health and Human Services also has an alternative response unit to take a more proactive approach to prevention with youth that get called into the hotline. And then some facts that they talked about related to Health and Human Services. Kind of in the past, they didn't look at it as a holistic need of that person. They kind of focused on the need that the person came into services for, rather than focusing on all the other needs that might be going on in that household. Other setbacks is the Bridge to Independence program. People can age out of that, and like certain things, factors, you cannot be part of that program. We also talked a lot about budget cuts that agencies and organizations have seen. So services that they've provided are no longer available in our communities. There's also a huge mental health, practitioner shortage, just lack of services in general, but meeting the needs of our community as well.
Next one. All right, let's go on to our second breakout.
All right, Zoom friends. Hopefully our audio is off. Okay, so the second breakout question, we're going to move to those strengths and weaknesses. And this is the present, so right now. I'm going to drop this into the chat so you guys can see it as well while we're chatting. So if we think about right now, what current strengths and weaknesses has the community seen that's prevented children and youth, focusing on that 6 to 17 range, from entering or re-entering the system. So Jessica kind of had some good thoughts of our past, and I don't know if that kind of works into the present, Jessica, that that lack of resources in the middle. We have crisis resources, maybe we have prevention resources, but maybe that middle is kind of where we're lacking. But other thoughts?
I think Circle of Security has been a real strength, even up to the older age group, just because it's really shared within school systems, practices, Head Start. And so it really just supports, again, I know that's the younger age, but still really supports the older children as well. And so that's been a huge strength, I think, for our community. And really the implementation has been strong because there's braided funding for it. That's made it accessible to all parents. There really are no barriers if a parent chooses to do so. And there's this nice inner community, I think, amongst professionals where we just send out emails and let everyone know when we're offering one, and people can inter-refer, and it's flowed really nicely.
They mentioned Thompson Scholars and Kearney Bound, and that's educationally specific, but I was the Kearney Bound coordinator for the last decade until I switched to Kearney Catholic. So I know that was a program that when it was initially implemented was just an access program. A lot of people call it a scholarship program, and that's accurate too, but it was designed to give students access to higher education. And it was students who would have normally struggled greatly or just not had that opportunity at all. And as a student in Carney Bound, as long as they apply as freshmen and only a certain number can be selected, but as long as they take the classes they're supposed to take and they don't suck at making decisions, stay out of trouble, and stay involved in like extracurricular activities, then they are able to go to UNK, and the program pays tuition fees, room, and their meal plan. So that's a big strength.
Thanks, Josh, for your thoughts. And Jody, Janelle, any strengths that you want to add?
Well, no, I'm sitting here thinking because I haven't worked with kids for about 20 years, so things have changed a lot. So I'm just listening right now.
Thank you, Janelle. I know I kind of thought of that as I said that. I'm like, probably thinking of the older population. Well, thanks for being a part of this, though, Janelle. So do you guys want to move to weaknesses? This, unfortunately, is easier for us to...
One more strength.
Yeah, Jody,
one more strength really quick is we've got some nice trauma-informed care moving into the school systems, public school systems, maybe even private as well. But I really do think there's been some nice movement in the last couple of years in that sense. We've got a long ways to go, but really some nice partnerships and work there.
Thanks, Jody. Gonna leave it open for another minute to work on strengths. I cut you off too early last time.
I see a stronger partnership with physicians as well. So lots of, we receive, and I think a lot of practices do physician referrals for specifics in terms of where there's some expertise for that, older elementary, middle school, high school age as well.
I'd say along with that too, that they are having more social workers or mental health people in the medical practices. That's one thing I have seen.
I was trying to scan some of their notes here as they're typing them in. They've got some good ones. Kearney Police Department, more involvement with youth, opportunities to build positive relationships. That's been awesome to see in the community. They put in here UNK having counseling program, support at KPS with social workers. So I don't see anything that's duplicate of what we had. So I think that's awesome. Do you want to jump over to weaknesses?
And as far as weaknesses go, Carney Bound and Thompson Scholars both concentrate on a specific group of students and a specific type of student. So while they are looking for a student with a good story to tell, they're still looking for students who have stayed out of trouble, students who are very supposedly highly academic achieving students. And then a different one that would have more impact on Janelle probably is like companies like AseraCare are not going to have bereavement staff anymore. So when somebody experiences a loss, whether it's like hospice care and expected, not that makes it easy by any stretch, or an unexpected loss, they don't have somebody who's specialized in caring for people with that loss. And when I found that out, I was shocked and appalled. So those are both weaknesses. The latter more so than the former, in my opinion. That's really sad to me that they're not concerned with offering that kind of care anymore.
I'm sorry, Josh, could you clarify maybe for me, is it just AseraCare, or you're saying organizations, sorry, I'm not as familiar, organizations like that?
AseraCare for sure, but also organizations like that, as budgets are kind of being revisited and looked at. So maybe there's an opportunity for somebody in the counseling community to establish a business that does that specifically, but there's going to be just a lack of people on staff to support people that for me, that would be like one of the cogs that they really need to have a person in place for that. So
I would just add that there's a lack of support groups across the community, across all types of needs, whether that is grief, bereavement, parent support groups, just wellness support groups, all across the board. There's a lack of support groups. And again, it's usually because the funding sources to do that it's not just a funding, it's also, because I mean, we've found that with COSP, and we're fortunate that we have lots of providers with lots of different schedules, but scheduling the right time to get the people to go that are available, that have access to it. I mean, I think that's why we see support groups not continue after they've gotten started, is because there's a lot of factors, but funding would be one of them. But the other one then is being able to offer it at the time that population can attend it. We all know it. It's an obvious one. We are short mental health providers. Even though there's a lot of us, we're short mental health providers. And that's a long-term answer, or the answer to that is a long-term one, but us providers are referring back and forth to each other as much as we can to get people in as fast as we can. And it's tough.
Yeah, to really double down on that, one of the things they mentioned earlier, UNK has a counseling center there and a program for certification through that. But about a month into each semester, the counseling center is booked for the rest of the semester. So a student might be able to get in to get help, but it's if there's a cancellation or something like that, rather than I know this kid needs help today, I'm not qualified to help them, so I need to get them to somebody who is, and they just can't get in. So yeah, it's not just it's community wide, but that extends to the UNK community as well. And it's budgetary, the biggest thing. Not only do the counselors there not get paid what they should, they don't have enough of them on staff anyway, so they're spread thin.
I see we're kind of hitting on some of the topics here too. Jessica, I don't know if you saw this, no warm center to help before a full-blown crisis. That's just what we were talking about in our first breakout. And then staff capacity they put there as well. Janelle, did you have a thought before we break?
Well, yeah, because I had asked about in Kearney area about RAP groups, even RAP training. And in my opinion, I felt like I was kind of oh yeah, we did that in the past, but I think that they really do have some merit, and especially like with peer support. I don't know if we use enough of peer support.
Yeah, we used to offer a wrap in the middle schools, and then COVID hit. That's the reason we stopped. But once we stopped offering it, our funding source also went away. So, and then with it, we'd have to retrain some new providers as well. Wrap used to be the training to be a trainer used to be offered more widely, and it has not been. And to touch, yes, we've lost peer support specialists in our community too, because of, it's not necessarily a lack of funding, it's the fact of how the position is typically paid. And even our peer support specialist position got cut because the agency itself was losing money. So that's a challenge too. I'll just put a weakness is anytime Medicaid gets involved. It's not necessarily a good one. No, don't put that.
I was like, well, you might be right.
Medicaid has, in some ways, is helpful, but in areas like with peer support, it has not been. And I guess to add to weaknesses, or maybe in a barrier, I was thinking about this earlier, is the limitations within service definitions. You know, in the mental health system, we are bound by service definitions to offer services, and which leaves gaps.
All right, so our top 3 for strengths was there's been a little more attention to early childhood as it has the highest dividends, expansion of early childhood initiatives and curriculum, focus on social emotional Spanish speaking trainings and parent education. That just 2 for our top. They're kind of all encompassing. Our weaknesses: burnout of educators and providers, compassion fatigue, stress for families, stress for employees, employers, community, lack of understanding of secure bond and attachment leads to all barriers on this list, and then lack of communication between parents and providers.
Okay, so we didn't pick top 3, so I'll just go ahead and kind of just pick a few of them. Within the last 2 years, there's been an increase of access to the services have improved. Like the 988 recently, we've also discussed like with certain programs like matching youth to a positive role model for mentoring. Teenage youth people that volunteer and are learning the value of this, non-forced to volunteer, so receive more of that, then be more willing to do that. More support for KPD, more community involvement with youth and other opportunities to build positive relationships. And then the mobile crisis response. Some weaknesses we discussed. Lack of rural services. Not as many options for support with school for younger than middle school age students. I think we're talking about mental health. And then no warm centers to help before a full-blown crisis. So before, there's intervention needed, so some approach beforehand. So.
Good job.
Yes, I'm talking again. Okay. So we didn't do top 3 either, so we wrote a bunch of stuff. But our strengths again went back to our accomplishments. Those scholarships are still there and still strong, so those are still being offered to you. COVID brought in extra funding, so there's those funding sources out there to utilize, whether that's through school systems or even adding the broadband programs so people have access to internet. There's also reduced rates for low-income families, And then we talked a lot about different task force that Kearney in general has through our community connection meeting that meets monthly, and those breakout programs that have come, or meetings that have come off of that, which focus on mental health, housing, and then working together as service units in our community. We talked about ride-along programs with the police force, with having a mental health practitioner going on with calls, and other types of programs like that that are being developed in local, county, and also across the state. We also talked about strengths of the Unite Us and the 211 to get resources to individuals, so people, anyone can find that stuff. And the weaknesses we talked about is transportation, huge, any aspect transportation is an issue. Undiagnosed traumatic brain injury, and how that affects this population of 18 and older, and what that looks like if they're getting involved with the justice system, or just problems that arise in their life. Is really a traumatic brain that is being, that injury that's not being affected or treated. Awareness of programs that are available. We all kind of know about those things, but is that stuff getting put out there? There's new programs, but how do we keep up on that? And the distribution of getting those resources to our target populations.
All right, our last breakout. We'll do the same thing, 10 minutes, and then we'll report out. You got us, Matt? Thank you. So, what?
I'm always so nervous to talk. I don't know if I'm booming into that room. Hopefully we're good. They'll turn me off if we get annoying, I guess. So now focusing on threats and opportunities. Go back to my agenda here to find our question to focus us. So what future threats and opportunities has the community seen that prevented children and youth from entering or re-entering the system? Drop that into the chat for us. I feel like we kind of started down that thinking train almost in some of the last discussions we had. So let's focus on threats here. Set as a timer, 4 minutes.
I'm kind of just watching their notes, and it's obvious. I know it's nobody's surprise that funding is like the first threat that comes up, but I guess in looking at the funding, it's almost like how we, not just as a community or as a state or as a nation, but just overall how people view the importance of mental health. Everyone says it's important, but then in the next conversation I'll hear, well, why won't you offer that service for free? So I think there's this misunderstanding with mental health and people who work in the mental health profession that we're in this because, obviously we're in this because we want to help, but there's kind of this almost idea that we shouldn't make a living either, but there's value, but they understand why somebody wants to, to work in a different profession and make the amount of money they do. But mental health providers, they should offer it for free. Should services be affordable? Absolutely, but that's a very complicated answer, is just making services affordable, as we all know with funding. But I think that I think services should be affordable and free? Absolutely, because we want everybody to have them. But on the flip side of that, those providing the services still need to be reimbursed for the services provided and be adequately reimbursed for the services provided, not just counselors. I mean, I'm talking across the board, our behavioral health providers. Oh, see, low paying position. Yep.
Jess, I saw that too. I was going to add that in. I was like, well, that kind of hits it. But I think those are really good thoughts. Jessica, I haven't really heard that mental health should be free. That's an interesting thought because it directly affects the providers, you know.
But I hear it in a different context, in that it's not just that it should be accessible. I mean, I've had people say that, like, well, you know, why, if a place denies like a certain funding source, right? And it's not usually because we want to, it's because of the reimbursement, right? Like we're losing money by accepting to choose that insurance company or something. And we should just eat the money because we should not deny that service to anybody. And so, yeah, that's come up more often than I would like to say it's ever come up from folks. And I just look at them and I'm like, but would you say that to your doctor? Would you say that to your accountant? Would you say that to other professions?
I've heard the same argument, same point, that like, you know, if you went to have back surgery, somebody has a horrible back, like, should that be free? Like you said, it should be affordable. And I don't know who's in charge of that. But anyway, school counselors are in a similar boat, that they're paid the same as teachers, but they're expected to have a different type of expertise that, and I got my degree in education, history education specifically, so probably the most useless of all of the education. But I think it's weird too that they expect to pay school counselors the same thing, but that's where somebody goes if they're struggling with, you know, an abusive parent or drugs, or they're just not coping with things very well. It's like, well, it's not the same thing as going to your history teacher, so why are they paid the same?
And we could expand that to daycare providers. And we could expand that to teachers. Like we have this interesting concept of these jobs of helping and caring should be at the expense of the person doing it.
You know, well, you didn't go into this line of work to be rich. Well, no, but I should be able to pay my bills, you know?
I would just add to that too. A lot of times, you know, we have to learn how to shut that off when we go home. And, you know, living in small communities, back in the day when I had my name in the phone book, you know, people would call you in the evening and ask you questions. And it's like, wait a minute, you know. And so I went to an unlisted number, you know, but it's just one of those things where you're supposed to be expected to be here 24/7 because, you know, you're supposed to help everybody at every minute of the day, which leads to our burnout.
Yep. And that's why there's been conversations around crisis services, and there seems to be a lack of capacity to provide more and more crisis services. And it's like, well, you're asking somebody to work at hours that are not really ideal of what most people want to work in, but you want to either pay them the same or less, and have really high expectations of them. And we have this idea that people should just be jumping to go do that because we want to help. And it's absolutely, we want to help, but we have to, you know, we always talk about self-care and setting healthy boundaries. Well, providers have to do that as well.
Do you think we can turn this conversation into an opportunity? Just kind of trying to think, I hear Janelle saying they expect, you know, as providers to be this crisis response at all hours. What's the opportunity here? Because I feel like there is one from this conversation we've had.
Well, we're getting the ride along people to go with police or law enforcement. I don't know if that's actually happened yet in Kearney, but it's in the works, I think, and in Grand Island too.
Yep, there's the co-responder model. It is up and going in Grand Island. They're struggling with capacity issues with Buffalo County. So there's opportunities there, but it's kind of opportunity meets the ability to do it, capacity. And sometimes there are opportunities there, like I said before, like we used to have rap groups, and that could be an opportunity in the future in the middle schools, but we have to have the capacity of providers to do it. So it's not always just a funding, like just straight up, is the funding available? It's usually much more complicated, like not only is funding available, but does it meet the service definition? If it doesn't meet the service definition, then the funding isn't available. If you do meet the service definition, do you have the providers to provide it?
I think another opportunity within Kearney, specifically probably GI as well, is that we do have UNK, which offers some interns that really then can provide some free services or even alternative services, because one of the kind of interwoven pieces here is that, you know, insurance companies are looking for us to provide a behavioral or cognitive service when, quite frankly, clinically, we're much more progressive, and we know that it's much more about neurodevelopmental issues, polyvagal issues, things that are well beyond that we can really document in the way that insurances want us to document behavioral health kind of issues. And so with UNK, we have the capacity to do some kind of innovative things with those interns, because we're not billing for it anyway. And that can offer some of those free and innovative services that can't necessarily meet that kind of archaic model that honestly managed healthcare continues to live by, because it is hard to bridge.
Yeah. And I would agree with Jody. I mean, we cross our fingers we're going to get, you know, 2 interns about every year to help us with those opportunities. Like I keep saying, it's like we can't crank them out as fast as we need them. But I would agree with Jody there. That is an opportunity.
Innovative and free.
Innovative and free without service definition, because you don't have to bill insurance.
Yes. And there is some nice partnerships. I'd like to expand that with UNK to really focus on children and adolescents, because there's so much that we could do with that age group.
As far as opportunities, I was just trying to read through. I do think a good opportunity is there is increased awareness around mental health and the need for all of this. And I think that there's momentum and motivation and energy more than there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like I think, and it's not just when we think about mental health services, it's not just, oh, they need counseling. It's more comprehensive, and that it's not a one size fits all. So I think that there's some really great opportunities out there that way, which is why we're all here. And I hope that keeps going so we can keep pushing the questions that need to be asked. So yeah, I think that it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with Jessica. I think there used to be a really big stigma about talking to a counselor at all. And then over maybe the last, few decades, that's kind of loosened up a bit. But then over the last few years, the width of topics that people don't have to worry about that. Like if they can get over it, like if they're okay with going and seeking counseling, it isn't like other people are are thinking, you know, like, oh, that's a weird thing that you need help for, other than like old white guys, right? Like we're just still knuckle dragging cavemen who can just go out in the shed and figure it out ourselves. But yeah, people are willing to seek help, and people are willing to share that they're seeking help. And I think that does a lot of good for the community as a whole. Just willingness.
And because of that opportunity, I do feel is why we are seeing the crunch on the capacity, like because we're seeing increased referrals. I also think that there's other contributing factors to that, but I think because there's more awareness, acceptance, and desire to look at these pieces, I think that's why we are needing more interns and needing more mental health providers.
Trying to see where they are in the room over there. Thank you guys. I love that energy of that conversation. Maybe we'll just kind of hold tight here. And thank you, Zoom participants, for kind of being our guinea pig of our hybrid meeting here. If you guys have any thoughts or comments, feel free to drop them into the chat about how we can make this better. The audio seems to be pretty good in that room. But if you guys have other comments about how we could kind of facilitate these hybrid meetings, I'm always open to suggestions. And I guess one thing that they're doing here is prioritizing these lists. So I think what Matt is doing is putting little stars by the ones that they think are high priorities.
It's probably just musical, but oh yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So our top 3 threats are social emotional impact of COVID, technology dependency as it relates to parents' productivity and less engagement with child, no boundaries, unintended modeling of overuse of technology. For work, social skills are declining because of it. Overstimulation, the inability to be bored. And then inflation threats the basic needs for a lot of families, which in turn is just kind of a ripple effect of all these other things. Opportunities, providing more opportunities for life skills, household chores, family, parent education, finances, which would also include some of that parent and human development in the high school. More paid maternal and paternal leave, and intentional and in-person programming aimed at creative outlets, finding the balance between your screens and real play.
All right, we discussed some of our threats. It's just funding and sustainability, as well as lack of family involvement or support. Something else we wanted to discuss was the high turnover rates, low-paying positions in the helping field, which can hinder the ability to form a really positive relationship with a young person, and they just get that rapport built, and then there's that turnover. Some opportunities, we talked about school support specialists through, was that correct, through Boys Town at Horizon. Make Buffalo County more inclusive, so not just the Kearney community, but rural communities as well. And I wanted to add an opportunity is celebrating young people when they prioritize their mental health. So really, you know, earn that stigma for themselves. Okay, so threads, we talked about finding funding for the services that we want to do. Staffing, just staffing in general, but also the burnout rate that goes along with that. And then issues with just re-engaging youth in general, trying to get them engaged in things. And then our opportunities, collaboratives that help meet community needs and action steps, not just conversation. Funding for COVID programs. So there's lots of opportunities and money out there to take advantage of and just getting the word out there to utilize that money. And then doing more work on prevention. So we have the opportunity now to focus on those prevention activities and programs.
Good job, everybody. I think there's been a lot of good dialogue today and a lot of good things brought up. Definitely things I've heard that I didn't even think of, and I'm sure a lot of you are that way too. We would like you guys to return to where you were sitting earlier and share anything that we might have missed today on those index cards. Share any concerns. We'll look at the cards and formulate a plan for next time. So sit down and do that. That would be awesome.
I do have something that people are interested. We have a juvenile justice coordinator position at the county attorney's office that's open. People have until the end of this month, about 2 more days to apply. I brought a few copies. I'll pass them around. So if you go to the Buffalo County website, there's an application, resume, just need that. So, if you know of anybody that's looking for a good job with the county, good benefits, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, no weekends, no on call.
Ain't getting worse than that.
I can just not say it.
Everybody had enough time to fill out their card, or you need a little bit more? What's that?
Said I didn't fill it out. Talking, you know, obviously it was talking.
Well, we wanted to thank you guys all for participating. Good work. on what we've accomplished today and the contributions you guys have made. We were talking, and we're going to use what we've written down and archived today and communicate to you guys some clear themes before we have our next meeting on August 24th here. So does that make sense to everybody?
It'll be our hope that in the next meeting, we maybe have enough thematic ideas so that we can go into groups and start action planning, rolling up our sleeves and starting to figure out how to tackle some of those issues. But we'll communicate via email in advance so that you can have an idea about where your area of interest lies in terms of more focused work.
It's nice to see some people in person.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you all.